Hi everyone, this is Leonora and I want to talk today a little bit about resistance. So resistance is all about the false self that, we can have selves that want to get ahead, that want to improve life, that want to get a result, that want something, want something different to what I have. Even though that sounds like something good, that is also resistance, so it's resistance to what is. It's resistance to this present moment. So I want you to recognize when you think about resistance that everybody has it and it's there and it's hidden often and lurking in the shadows. So what is resisting is there is a part of the system, the whole system of being a human that has self-awareness. And that self-awareness is a gift, but also a challenge. And the part of us that goes into resistance is kind of like the reptilian part of the brain that's really engaged with safety, protection, survival. And it's purely a matter of an experience that couldn't be integrated, potentially a past experience that couldn't be integrated. In other words, that you could not remain present for. So, these tend to be in that lower brain. That its only focus is not about whether you're happy or not. It's not whether you're having a fulfilling life or not, but it's really engaged in just the process of keeping you alive. And it gets derailed by having self-awareness. So one example that I like to share is that, if you were a wild animal, you didn't have this separate self thing, that you're busy eating grass, and then your instinctive self, your instinctive qualities or facilities that are built in detect danger, that there's a lion, there's a rustling in the bush, or there's something happening right now. It's not happening as a memory, it's happening only right now. Animals don't have a sense of I, basically. So when that happens, it just kicks off and the gazelle will run. More likely than fight a lion, it will run. And at some point, it's going to get to a place, again, sensing in the present moment where it feels safe. Maybe the lion gave up or maybe found a different gazelle. And so what happens to that gazelle is it sort of shakes a little bit, and then carries on eating grass, and it doesn't hold a story about the lion or what happened to me. So in juxtaposition to that, as a human being, what happened in that experience potentially is that we became, likely that we became overwhelmed. So we might have run and we might have outrun the danger. However, in that whole process, which was kind of like too much for the nervous system, some part of us split off, and now we have a story. We are learning, we are evolving, and the story is it's not safe, to be here. It's not safe to be out in nature because things might get you. I mean, it'll have some flavor of story. And what has actually happened is that we have created a sense of self, which is a false self, which is living in the story of that danger. So what is actually happening from an experiential standpoint is that the totality of that profound experience of feeling afraid and running, in fact, actually, when you run, you are not afraid, you're just kicking in adrenaline and whatever needs to happen. It's actually kind of, in the process, there's this split and there's a kind of freeze into a position. And that position is hell-bent on ensuring that that never happens to you again. And it also narrows what's possible down to staying safe. Yeah, it's like becomes that sense of self kind of has inbuilt coping strategies. And the fundamental strategy is not to feel, you know, because if I go back into the moment, which is now incomplete, it hasn't fully resolved, it hasn't been metabolized, you know, if I go there, I might die. So if you think about that deeply, you will die, but only your story will die. Only that sense of self that became separate will die. So what we're actually doing with this embodied truth practices is really an ongoing ego death. And you just become better and better at allowing those stories and those positions to die. But the thing is, you cannot understand this with your mind and let them die. You have to have a direct experience of what has created that separation. The felt sense holds an experience, an energetic. Yeah, it's kind of in your field, even if it's hidden from you or subconscious now, which is what usually happens when I split off. I become unconscious. I become separate from that experience that I'm now afraid of. So there's a sense of I in separation from and in relationship with this past experience that I'm now afraid of. And the fear is real because it's unresolved and it's sitting in your field. But it's also at the same time not real, or it's up for resolution or recalibration, or what I like to call reclaiming your power. So the way to do that is to turn love toward the experience. So I was on a thread and I might have just gone off it. So when you endeavor to go into your field, what is going into the field is kind of using a filter, which is that sense of I that split off in that past experience, has created a filter, and somewhere in that filter is what I call resistance. And the resistance is, if I go there, I'll die. Yeah. So most of us, I would say all of us, are anchored in that filter unconsciously. We can't see it, we're looking through it. And we are projecting shadows into the system. We are in a relativistic, in a relational dynamic with something inside us, which is not loving. That relational dynamic is not loving. In fact, you could say any relational dynamic is not loving, is not loved back into wholeness. So the quest here is, what I found is you can submit and surrender to these experiences in the body as a practice, which is really valuable. Yeah, because that's giving you courage, that's giving you power. But you can't heal them at the causal layer just doing that. That what I found in my own journey was that, you know, after many, many years, I was very good at healing. And I would just clear things and clear things and clear things. But what came to my attention was that they wouldn't clear back to the origin. They would clear to kind of like a better place. And there would be still things in my field that were troubling me. And there was a sense of self that I began to notice, who was attached to the idea of I'm broken and I need to fix. And that position is a false position. And it's created out of all the trauma that your system is holding. And as long as you're operating from there, you are limiting what's possible. So it's a practice, you know, you can't bypass the direct experience learning that you have to have. You can't just listen to what I say. You can't just understand what I say and then just be there. You actually have to have the journey, and it's a unique journey. So in my own quest of finding the causal layer of trauma, what I found, you know, at first I thought it was leaving the light, but ultimately I found it was leaving the infinite, undivided self, yeah, from which we're birthed. And what I also found was that this sort of trauma healing technologies, or the trauma healing approach, was missing that kind of endpoint. It's not a real endpoint, as in end done forever. It's an endpoint of exploration, that when I reach that infinite self, that is love, that is truth, and the alchemy that is available there will heal whatever's in my frame of reference at that point. And then there'll be another thing to explore. But as you keep clearing the field, there's a couple of things to think about. One is that you're becoming more yourself. Like every trauma that you clear, especially the deep ones, you are inhabiting more of yourself, so that the rapidity of healing and clearing becomes quite profound and can become quite quick. Yeah, it's like a fast track. So in the old days, I used to call this work fast track Buddhism, because I was joking here, a recovering Buddhist. I'd done about 15 years of Buddhist practice and got quite messed up and quite stuck because I hadn't either heard the guidance, but I don't actually think the guidance was given about integration and how to do that. And it was not out there in the world that I traversed in, which is why I found my own way. So that's the good news. As you clear things from the field, you're sort of exponentially gathering more power to be yourself. And so you're amplifying. The more yourself you are, the easier it is to clear things. So what is happening in the beginning is that you're oriented from a false self. You know, you're oriented from who you think you are. And that one is always got an agenda, and it always wants a result, and it always wants to fix things. So as you do fix things, if you fix them to the causal level, which is the infinite absolute, your sense of self itself starts to die, and what is born is your true self. So in this work, working with resistance, what became really important is the contrast. Like if you've only ever kind of had a knowing of who you are based on a false self, you don't actually have a contrast. You don't actually know what a true self is. Like we're seductively believing these stories that the false self is holding. We're seductively believing this position of our victim, of our powerlessness, of, you know, all that stuff. So this heart-centered sovereignty, part one, if you will, is really about a soul initiation. It's about an ability to anchor into the resource of love at what I would think of as kind of two levels. They have gradients. One level is the light of your soul, which you find in the heart center. And the other level is the deeper core of the heart, which is the infinite and the absolute. So as my work evolved and became more coherent, and my transformation, you know, kind of anchored into me, what I realized was, rather than just this top-down approach of healing trauma, which is really guided by the false self, was that a bottom-up approach of becoming myself was so powerful and so available. The light is far more powerful than the shadow. So the contrast is really fundamental to your ability to navigate, because You have been seduced and told lies, and you are believing them. And when you anchor in truth, those lies dissolve in the light of truth. So the practices of the light and of stillness really are in some way like the end point. They're the place where all the false selves and all the experiences that the false self is inadvertently, unconsciously creating will dissolve. So learning to kind of come from the bottom up, from being the ground of being, is really incredibly powerful, and an alignment to it is incredibly powerful. So what is actually happening at this level is that many people are finding resistance. As the more you go to your heart, the more you do that practice, the more it illuminates what's in the way of you being yourself. So the key here is really the continual choice to be your true self and to discover who your true self is. You know, rather than to get rid of sadness or fear, it's really to become your true self, because there is no sadness or fear when you are that. If you're anything else, there is a relativistic experience going on. So when I say relativistic, there's a perceiver or an experiencer in a relational dynamic with an inner experience. So for example, if you have sadness, there's an I, or a sense of self, which is sad. And that sense of self may also be afraid of your sadness. And that sense of self is a false self. So at the first level of this working with resistance, we have to anchor into love. So if that's available to you, if that's available through your heart connection as the light or as stillness, the key is to choose your heart and to choose your light and to choose your stillness and to seep into those, to give contrast to the sadness or the fear and the one who is sad and the one who is afraid. So these elements I call the Trinity. There's the heart, the light and stillness. There's the one perceiving the experience, which is also co-creating it. And then there's the experience itself. And that I call the Holy Trinity. And I get into that more and more as we do these practices and get into, once we're established in a good field of awareness that is stable, we can actually speed up the process, but we can't bypass the process. So if you're having sadness or fear coming up when you access your heart, the key is not to disconnect from your heart. So what's actually happening is that these old traumas or these old stories and the storyteller are kind of like ancient pathways that we've been treading, you know, in our own life and in our ancestors, and, you know, back in time, we've been treading these pathways, yeah, of being afraid and avoiding the shadow. And so we are rewiring those pathways from the alchemy of love. And so what's required is to choose love, that in every moment you have to choose love and you align with it. And so when you choose love, you can love the fear and you can love the one who's afraid. And so how that works energetically in a practical sense is that you don't disconnect from the heart. What is actually happening is that when that material arrives in your field, it has a magnetic and powerful force that pulls you out of your heart. You might not notice that. It potentially pulls you out of your connection to your true self and gets you entangled with the story and oriented as the one afraid. So the first thing is, notice if you disconnect from your heart and come back if you can, and establish yourself again in your heart. And when you are anchored energetically through the connection in the felt sense of your heart space, then you turn your awareness towards the sadness or the fear, and feel it as an energy without the label. It's like as long as you keep labeling it, you'll keep attaching to the label. So just feel it as an energy and do the best that you can as far as having a direct experience of that in the body field, in the field of awareness. Once you've done that, once you've chosen to stay in your heart and to allow this sadness or fear or anger or whatever's arising in the field of you, then you need to also notice the one who's telling the story about it, the one who's holding a position of, I don't want to be sad, or I don't like my sadness, or I'm afraid. That one is usually, can be outside the field, or at least it's separate from it. It's going, I don't trust that, I won't go there. And so if you anchor in your heart and just sense outward and allow the one who doesn't want to be here to be here, turn your heart, see with the eyes of love, then just hold still and steady in love. If you are true in love, that part of you will alchemically and automatically return. What's in the way is that you are leaving love and anchoring in an agenda to get rid of the fear and to get rid of the sadness. And that is not love. That is not the alchemy of love. That is a coping strategy in itself. So this is a practice. You have to notice who is practicing as well. So that's what I want to share for today about resistance. And, keep practicing and keep noticing and keep your alignment still and steady about where you're going in becoming your true self. Blessings for your journey.